So we're going to talk about continuous improvement today and meaningful program improvement efforts. The biggest thing that we're going to focus on is this idea of continuous improvement, not as just something you're required to do, not just as something that's this kind of big picture thing that everybody is really supposed to emphasize, but as something that can actually lead to practical improvement. And in those efforts at practical improvement, you can actually get some really cool stories that you can use for reviews, grant applications, and the others, because you can have lots of little wins that add up to major transformation. So we're going to really focus on that today. And to give you just an idea of who we are, if you're not familiar with Acorn Learning, we're where Head Start goes to sustain positive change. We focus on training professional development programs for Head Start programs across the country to really help programs to build stronger services for the children and families in their communities, to have better outcomes, both for the children and families in the community, but also for the staff and the other folks who work in the program. So we're all about building mechanisms and structures and culture around making positive change. Everything we do is all there at acornlearning.com. You can take a look and see all the different things that we have available, workshops and certificate programs and everything else, including not quite posted yet, but coming soon will be some options for the return of customized trainings and some in-person work. So basically, we're going to do webinar basics up front, and then we're going to do continuous improvement and Head Start. I have two particular continuous improvement examples that I'm going to go over, and then we'll do some quick things about what's happening with Acorn, and then a Q&A at the end. All righty. So I'm Dr. Greg Dixon. I'm the Chief Learning Officer. My job is basically to make sure that all the different things that we do, we refer to them as learning events because we do a lot of different kinds of them, from free things like this webinar all the way to more expensive things like more substantial certificate programs, things like that. We do programs that are live. We do programs that are fully online. All these different programs, we want them to be a really positive experience for the folks who attend them, and that you will take something back to your program that you can use once they are over. So that's my job. That's what I do. And believe it or not, that's pretty much what I do every day. That's my focus, is making sure that we have strong, relevant trainings for everybody. This webinar is being recorded. So if you're in a state where we have to tell you that, we have told you that. And the live captioning is also turned on, so you should be able to see the transcript and also the little subtitles as we go, if you want to see my words translated onto the screen as we go along. Participants are muted, and we'll change that when we get to the Q&A at the end. But when we get to the Q&A, we will turn that recording off so that folks who contribute are not on YouTube. There is a short anonymous survey at the end, just some quick feedback. We do practice what we preach on continuous improvement, so we are interested in hearing your feedback about the webinar and as well about other things you might want to hear about. The slide deck will be emailed at the conclusion of the webinar, along with a link to the recording. Please enter any questions or comments in the chat as we go. And if it's something I need to stop and address right off the bat, I will do that. Otherwise, I will save them for the Q&A at the end. So, continuous quality improvement, also referred to as CQI in Head Start. We're just going to review quickly what CQI is. We're going to explore one of the various ways of thinking about and implementing continuous quality improvement, and then I'm going to use that framework to discuss a couple of use cases that are derived from actual experience working with programs and how continuous quality improvement both led to improved results, but also gave really nice stories for how the program is using data, using a process of continuous improvement to improve the services that were there for children and families, and to improve how the program was able to operate. So to start off with, continuous improvement is a process for improving outcomes that uses frequent, small, gradual improvements to build significant change over time. We can think of change as occurring in big revolutionary steps, but that's pretty rare. Also, mildly terrifying when change comes in big revolutionary steps. It's a lot to take in. You can achieve similar long-term results by doing lots of small, gradual changes. One of the other things that's especially valuable with continuous improvement in a Head Start context is you can bring people together in an inclusive context to help get contributions from throughout your program. One of the biggest things about Head Start is that you have a lot of expertise built up in your institutions. And that includes people who are members of line staff who every day are out in the field collecting data, interacting with parents, all these different things that they're doing. Involving them in efforts to improve the program can be very useful. One of the other things that's important is as you involve staff more holistically, you tend to get more buy-in on the changes that you are making. Changes are a lot less terrifying if you're one of the people at the table making decisions about what that change is going to look like. So part of thinking about continuous improvement that can be challenging is thinking of it as cyclical in nature. This means that you are going to go through this process and you follow a series of strategies, you make a series of decisions, you undertake some actions. And when you're done, you're not actually really done. It just leads to the next stage, the next iteration of the work that you're doing. So it's a cyclical process and it follows steps, but then those steps are leading into future cycles. So it's an interesting blend here of thinking about a process that you could follow, but also knowing that it's really a culture, a thought process, a way of thinking about change in this system. Now, if you go out into the world and you start looking for quality improvement models, they all are cyclical. They all look like this, and they have tons of different names. The Carnegie folks, they do plan, do, study, act. So you very often will hear in education about PDSA cycles, plan, do, study, act. But one of the funny things is they all boil down essentially to something that we're encapsulating in 3 stages here in what's called PIA, plan, implement, analyze. And in various types of presentations in various contexts, I'll use different frameworks that are more appropriate for the groups that I'm thinking of. But for most applications in Head Start, the PIA framework is really very useful because this really is what you're going to do in practice. And this also helps you to see the relationships between what you are doing now in an existing cycle, how it will help you to see and feed into future cycles as well. So plan, implement, analyze is a good framework to think about when we're talking about what is it really going to look like day to day in my program as I try to implement program improvement. So PIA, plan, implement, analyze. And the cycle involves sitting down in an early stage, planning out what you're going to do, implementing it, and then analyzing the results to see how you did. It's important to remember that you don't have to have some big miraculous outcome. And sometimes when you do these, you find out that there's stuff you didn't know about. And that made it so that when you're analyzing things at the end, it's very different than you expected it to be. That's just fine. You can have weirdness, unexpected things that then feed future efforts in these cycles. When we think about the planning stage of PIA, you're going to identify the problem that you are going to address, evaluate root causes, evaluate related workflows, and select a change that should promote the desired outcomes. What is it that you are going to measure to evaluate how things went? And you decide how you're going to evaluate the success of that change. Now, one of the things about this is when we think that there's a problem that we're going to address, one of the things that comes along is, oh, well, there has to be something that's wrong. It can also be that there's a question that you have come up with, and you're not really quite sure what the answer is. And you're looking at ways you can explore what's going on to get an answer to your question. Sometimes it's an actual problem. You found something that's wrong and you have to fix it. But sometimes it's actually just a puzzle. And planning through how am I going to evaluate this and how am I going to see about solving the puzzle, that can be an important part of what inspires you to do CQI projects. And a lot of times, these projects are actually going to start with kind of a question that somebody raises that doesn't have the answer they expected, or you can't answer it and you have to figure out how you're going to go about doing it. But the important part about planning is you are thinking clearly about how you are going to evaluate in the analyze stage how things went in the implementation stage. So if you're looking at something and you're saying, I really need to understand how this is working, and then we can analyze the data to see if we're getting the outcomes we want, you need to think about what data you're going to need to do that analysis. And if you're not collecting that data, or if you're kind of collecting it, but the data quality isn't where you want it to be, you want to take a step back and think about maybe our CQI project is actually a little different than we thought. Maybe we're going to devise a way of getting the data we want. And then the next cycle will be evaluating what that is. So let's plan now to collect the data and evaluate at the end, did we get the data we need and was it high enough in quality? The cool part about these cycles is that there's a lot of flexibility built in here. You're not locked into plans must look like the following things, the following 8 characteristics. The plan can just be a question, and then how are we going to go about answering that question? Now, the implementation, if you are going to make changes to something that your program is doing, pilot the changes. I can't emphasize this enough. There's a tendency to want to make change across the board. That can be done, but a lot of times we're tackling stuff that's new, and we're going to try a new way of doing things. If you're going to try a new way of doing things, take a pilot group who's going to test it out and have them see what it's like to do it in the real world. Even if you've just gone to a conference and you saw an amazingly charismatic presenter talk about this whole new way of doing things, don't take it back to your program and wipe out all the existing things and bring in this new thing. Pick a group of people to test it. Every program is different. The real world, it can have a sense of humor in strange ways. You want to be able to see what it's like to do something in practice, in reality. So for implementation stages, when you have something new or when you have a different approach, I strongly recommend piloting it. Have a subgroup doing it, and don't pick all the best people who are super committed to the new thing. Pick some people who are a little contrarian, who are going to raise issues. You don't want to bring in people who can kind of be toxic around change because they can derail your pilot, but you do want to have a couple people who are at least skeptical so that you have somebody in there who's not really trying to make sure everything succeeds perfectly. You want to be able to say, okay, I need to be able to know if this is going to work in reality. And you have to have a range of different people in there. You are going to track the impact of the change in the implementation stages. One of the reasons why you pilot is you can look at the pilot group and compare it to the people who are doing the same things that they have done before. And you can say, is this pilot achieving the ends that we wanted? What weirdness is coming up? We thought we had it all mapped out. It turns out that in the real world, these things are not quite working the way that we expected it, or it's all going perfectly, in which case you should be a little suspicious because things are rarely perfect. But if you got it all correct in the planning stage, great. Evaluate whether or not the things that you think will be improved are being improved. You don't have to wait till the end to begin analyzing. You can be evaluating the implementation stage as you go. And good planning will help you to do that as you go along. Collecting the relevant data is important for 2 reasons. One, the process of going about collecting the data is one that will help keep you on track and help keep you focused on the outcomes. If you have set everything up right in the plan, the data is going to help you evaluate as you go. You are always comparing your pilot group to the existing ways of doing things to see whether or not this new way will actually work. Believe it or not, there's some people who present at conferences having the wonderful new systems, and this is great, this is revolutionary, everybody should do it. When you go try it in practice, it doesn't really work as well as it does in theory. This is particularly important in the Head Start world where every program is different. What worked in a densely populated urban area with a program that only has urban, major, metropolitan area centers, that might not work really well for a predominantly rural program or a migrant program. It is context dependent. So if you're going to bring in something new, pilot it and see how things go in practice and evaluate it relative to how things are already being done. Now, the analyze stage is where you put all this stuff together and you review the outcomes. I've looked at my pilot group. I know what happened. I know the outcomes we got. I'm comparing it to the old ways group. What are the outcomes here? Are they actually any different in practice? Sometimes you find out that this new revolutionary thing isn't all that revolutionary and things turn out pretty much the same way. Other times, yeah, it was revolutionary. Wow, the outcomes we wanted were a lot more common in the pilot group than they were in the old ways group. One of the other things that can sometimes happen is you discover something new. You discover, well, the pilot way, this new revolutionary way, didn't work really well, but there's some pieces of that that actually can be borrowed. And we can bring in some things that we discovered that aren't part of the old ways group, and they weren't part of the pilot group. But we think that they might really have some cool change, which we can then implement next year in the next cycle. Did the change result in the improvement you wanted should always be evaluated based on some concrete way of thinking about this. Evidence, preferably data-based evidence, if everything got collected the right way. And remember, qualitative data is still data. So qualitative and quantitative data can come together. But did you get the change that you wanted? What surprises were there? That's always a fun thing to ask. But the big thing is, if you're running a pilot, you end up at the end with a question. Was this pilot successful enough that we should roll this out for everybody? And this becomes the new way of doing things. You might run a pilot and you might find out that, yeah, you got improvement, but it really took a lot of time and effort and resources to make it work. And in practice, you just can't roll that out to your organization as a whole. That is a real thing that happens in the real world. And it happens all the time when we have new revolutionary things that come out of Research One universities who have large amounts of money and a bunch of graduate students working for people who can come in and put enormous amounts of time and effort into making something happen. In the real world, you don't have that support. You don't have that time. It may not work the same way. So the analyze stage is particularly important. It is especially important because one of the things that will come out of the analyze stage is, what are you going to do next? And in a quality improvement world, that is going to feed into this idea of a continuous iteration. The analysis at the end of one cycle leads into the planning in the next cycle of improvement. So when you have done this work to get this improvement, you've piloted, everything's great. Then in the next stage, you've decided the pilot worked and it's implementable and you're going to roll it out to everybody else. This is a new PIA cycle, rolling that piloted process out to everybody in the program. Making a change in data entry procedures, documentation, anything like that, you have finished one cycle and you are leading into the next. And this continues as you go forward. Now, in practice, in the real world, it may not be that every single time you do these cycles, every year you're looking at the same thing. You have limited time, you have limited resources. You might get to a point where everything is working well enough and you're going to put your quality improvement efforts into a different area that needs more attention, but you always want to keep in mind this frame of reference. There's always improvements that can be made. It may not be that your emphasis stays in one particular thing for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, but you do want to always think about, okay, well, how can I make improvements? If you've got family advocates that are telling you, this is really cool, but you could make these little changes to the data entry screen in Child Plus, and it would save us time, that's something that you can implement. It's not a major change. It might only be a small change, still part of quality improvement. And even if your focus has moved on to a different area, you can continue to take those suggestions and make those changes, particularly if they're small and easy to implement. So in the Head Start program performance standards, you have to do quality improvement. It's not optional. It's actually built into it. And it's not enough just to do it. You have to demonstrate that you are doing it. So recipient programs must demonstrate a program of continuous improvement that is supported by data. And one of the challenges with this is how exactly do you do that? And this is a big piece of the puzzle. When we talk about practical applications of these things in our programs, we want to think about, how do I communicate this to reviewers? How do I include it in my grant cycle? Is this part of our self-assessment? Are we assessing our capacity for continuous improvement? Are we evaluating how continuous improvement projects are going? This is a big deal because we want to be able to do these things. Yes, we have to comply and do it, but also they help improve the program. They genuinely do lead to better outcomes for children and families. But as we all know, performance standards are the performance standards, and quality improvement, continuous quality improvement, is a central element in the program performance standards. Programs are expected to practice continuous improvement in order to achieve program goals. Now, one of the things about this is there are pieces in these protocols about how this is going to be implemented that focus in a handful of areas. Programs have to actively monitor their services, evaluate services using data to identify areas where program improvement is possible or necessary, actually make improvements, and then evaluate the impact of these improvements with data. The challenge a lot of times is, how do you articulate this? And part of this is reviewers are still learning how to ask about these things. And with a bunch of new protocols this year that we don't know that much about, we don't necessarily know how this is going to look. So having a flexible way of talking about this is going to be particularly important, especially with some of the changes this year, where we're still kind of waiting to figure out what exactly are reviewers going to ask in this world, and how, just because we've changed names, how different is this going to be in practice? Still working on it. So I'm going to talk now about two examples of what this looks like, and then I'm going to come back to that storytelling effort. These are both examples that are real. These are real programs that have implemented these things. I'm taking multiple programs with similar experiences and putting their stories together to make it smoother and to emphasize a couple of points that I want to make. But these are things that have happened in real programs and have been part of real quality improvement efforts. The first one is, where do they hear about us? Finding out where applicants to your program have heard about your program. And so the status quo for this starting point here is that the program has basically been doing the same thing for as long as anyone can remember for recruitment. The idea is, we're going to go find people. And every year they just re-up all the things that they've done in the past. And so the strategy in the past has focused on radio, print, and billboards. In this particular case, the programs that had the similar experiences were both in areas where you have large stretches of rural areas where you only have a handful of major highways. So anybody who's moving from one part of the community to another is likely to travel a certain section of these major highways, and then that's really the focus. Also, there are radio stations that serve the entire service area, and a handful of print publications that are serving these communities as well. So this is just how it's been done. And every year it gets re-upped. And families come, they get engagement. So this is just how things are. Well, it's also not being evaluated. And this is a question that comes when you have some new folks come in who are younger, who say things like, print, and are surprised to hear that there is print to actually go and put ads in. And radio, the younger generation streams everything. So as you get younger people coming into the program as staff members, the question is, like, are we really doing things this way? And one of the interesting things then is it generates a question. Where do families find out about your program? Not just any families, but families that have come and actually filled out applications. So people who are engaged enough that they have come in and filled out applications. Where did they find out about the program? Are these existing strategies that we just automatically redo every year, are they actually working? Are they generating people coming in? Or is it just inertia that keeps these things going, and you do it because it's been done before. And the answer to this is interesting. In theory, yeah, families, when they come in and they're going through the application process, how they found out about the program is supposed to be part of that. In practice, the data is not there. One of the challenges is if you do not use data and things are busy and things are challenging, the data isn't necessarily going to get collected. It's there when they can get it in there, but in a lot of cases, the area where you asked, how did you find out about us? How did you figure out that we existed as Head Start? The data had a space to put it in there, but it wasn't there because it had never really been looked at systematically before. And in a world where you have 3,000 things to do and time to do 2,200 of them, you're going to do the thing that has follow-up and has some actual focus to it. So can't answer the question if you don't have the data. And so this becomes an interesting challenge. We have a serious question: print, billboard, radio, to somebody who is in a modern media environment that doesn't sound like it's going to be as effective as some alternatives might be, but you don't know. It might be that there's a quirk in your community and everybody listens to the radio, and that's how everybody finds out. You don't know. If you don't have the data, you can't answer the question. Plan. Well, since we don't have the data, we need to get it. So there's a new procedure for collecting where families hear about the program and training staff on how important it is to know how families have heard about the program. And this is important. Just coming up with a new procedure doesn't matter. You have to support that procedure. One of the things we always advocate is start with why. Why is it that we are asking families how they heard about us? It's because we want to know the most effective way to communicate with potential future Head Start families to bring them into the program. Full enrollment initiative. We want as many people as we can get coming in so that we can fill the program. How do we know how to engage with them? How do we find them? So that kind of training, telling people what's important, telling people why it's important, is significant. And so this is part of the plan. Okay, we're going to have a new procedure and we're going to train on it. We're going to do this in a way that will support not just the staff who are doing this, but also their supervisors. We're going to help them to help the others. So the actual implementation, during the application process, staff collected this information. And importantly, supervisors reviewed applications to confirm that the application information was being collected as expected, which meant that when you saw that there wasn't information in there, you had folks go back and get that information and complete it. That doesn't mean you dropped an anvil on everybody's head and said, you're not following the procedures. That means you just said, oh, hey, wait, we don't have it for this person. Let's go back and ask them and make sure we get that information. When you show that you are following up and that this information is important and that you want to make sure that you've got it and that it's accurate and you're doing it in a way that's supportive, is the reason that this information is missing is because you don't have time to get it because you seem to have a lot of applications. Friendly, supportive ways. You can frame this in a lot of different ways using good management and communication techniques. Always remember that most of the time when there is a problem, it's usually structural in the system, not really necessarily the responsibility of individuals. You want to provide supportive systems for individuals. So supervisors reviewing applications, having been trained to be supportive and engaging in a way that's not punitive, make sure that you're going to get the data and that it has a higher likelihood of being accurate when it's collected. So the implementation stage goes along and analyze the data. This is a evaluation of, on the application, where did you hear about us? When you analyze this data, I made a donut chart here, partly because I've been talking a lot about donut charts. So I actually had a chance to make one. I made one. Partly because in something like this, where we have a small number of categories, this kind of visual reference is useful in an explanatory way. Existing families referring new families was 60% of where new families heard about the program. Social media people posting about things that were going on, the program posting about activities that they were doing, social media. This could also include social media advertising. I would actually argue that you want to think of the social media where you are out posting and engaging with the families in your program. You want to separate that out from ads if you're doing ads. In this particular data collection effort for the programs that did this, they did not separate it out. So social media is 25%. So 25% of the time, people found out about the existence of Head Start because they saw it on social media. Community events, where you actually set up a table at a community event, was about 10%, and other 5%. So all of the other things together, which by the way included your radio, your billboards, and your print, 5%. Those three, which are the main areas where money and time is being spent, are lumped together with other things that barely got 5%. So in the analysis portion, we have good data now. We've done our planning. We've implemented. Now we have good data. We can say that I have a good reflection of where our families come from in reality. And now this is a question of what you do about it. So when we think about this, we've got our information, we've got it all together. So when we look at the results, the costly existing recruitment campaign is almost totally ineffective. Doesn't work. 5% was other. And within that other is everything that is really the focus now. And remember, when you're talking about billboards and you're talking about radio ads, that's pricey. So in this particular case, the analysis suggests that the programs should be putting their resources in different ways, in different areas. So in this particular case, each of the programs that were involved in this had slightly different approaches to it, but all of them switched to an emphasis on referrals and social media, with community events as a supplement to that as well, because community events did turn out to be a good way to have people find out that Head Start exists, in particular in areas where community events, where large numbers of people who are in the Head Start population, so families living in poverty, come to a particular set of community events every year. If you can be at those events and be visible and have information, you can bring people in. So the result here of this first PIA cycle is a pretty substantial one. The area where existing resources were being focused wasn't the right area. There are different ways to engage with potential Head Start families. Now, the question is, what do you do next? And this is one of the things where the cyclical nature of quality improvement is an important part of it. You've got this information, you can make these adjustments, but you don't know, like, should I be taking out ads on social media? Do I need a social media coordinator? Can I get an intern from the local community college who does social media marketing, who can just start posting more about it and engaging with our families more? Or do we need the teachers to engage with the families online? Who knows? That's what the next PIA cycle will be. The next of my examples is the families are all doing great, understanding family strengths and needs. This is actually this is one that's very, very common. This is not just a couple of programs. This is a bunch of programs that all run into something similar to this, with the reality of how strengths and needs are measured. It's one of my favorite examples because it's one that both features the movement towards an extended ongoing PIA cycle over several years, but also it really reflects one of the things that's interesting about Head Start. Very good, well-meaning people doing the best they can in their jobs can sometimes have unintended consequences. So family strengths and needs. Every year, families are screened for strength and need based on PFCE framework categories. The results are used to identify where program resources should be directed. So where is the area of greatest need for our families? We're going to focus on the top 3, the top 4 areas of need so that we can put our resources where they can have the most impact on our communities. Sometimes you might also have this as, where do the families really want our help? And we can focus there and maybe move the needle more. But for the purposes of this example, I'm really just focusing on the specific areas that we're identifying as areas of need. So quick visualization of the data from the fall, new data coming in, and we're looking at some particular areas housing, food security, and income support. This is the fall. I'm surveying, or applying the screening to the family. So this is family advocates engaging with families. And there's a lot of strong in here. One of the interesting things then is on income support, 91% of families are being scored as strong in the fall. So this is the first one of the year on income. If I were to ask everybody to take some votes as to how likely it is that people living at the poverty level are strong on income support, my guess is that I would get a lot of people saying that's not a very realistic view of the world. 91% of families in the fall strong on income. You have to be pretty much at the federal poverty level to qualify for Head Start in most parts of the country. It's not an exact one-to-one relationship, but it's pretty close. It's a good proxy. I don't know a whole lot of places in the country where the federal poverty level would make you strong in income, and particularly in major urban centers. Like, we're based in San Diego, California, and the federal poverty level here rents you a cardboard box under a freeway overpass. It is extremely difficult here to just get by day to day at the federal poverty level. And I mean, really difficult. If this was a San Diego based program and we saw food security and housing also in that 85-90% range, it is definitely not the case that families living anywhere near the poverty level, even the California corrected poverty level, which is a much higher level of income than the federal one, even families at that level are going to struggle in major metro areas in California. So this is not a very realistic looking reflection of the state of the world. It's not impossible, but it's not very likely. So the question when you see data like this is, how are 91% of the families living at the poverty level strong on income support? Something is off here. And this is an issue because when we think about how we are going to allocate resources towards the needs of the families in our community, if we don't have accurate information about what those needs are, we can't allocate our resources effectively. We don't know where to put our limited resources. There is no Head Start, there's no any program in the country, not just Head Start. There are no programs who have unlimited resources or magic wands and unicorns to help them do these things. You have limited resources. You have limited people, time. Where do you put your efforts to help families? To answer that question well, you need good data, good information. So what we do know is 91% is not a reflective of reality, but we don't know why that number is what it is. We don't know why the number is so high. You looking at the data, you don't know. You know that that's not reality, but what's up? Like, why is this happening? You can make assumptions, but unless you happen to have your whole career been a family advocate working with this particular kind of instrument and you have a real insight into it, you may not really be in a position to make a judgment on it. Me coming from outside of Head Start originally when I first started, I could have come up with 20 different explanations for this, but they would have just been guesses. One of the things about a quality improvement effort is that you don't have to just sit in an office and make a guess. You can actually go out and explore this as an organization, as a team. And if you build the right organizational culture, that is exactly what you should do to support this. So in the plan, you're going to gather a group of people who are involved in using this screening together, and you're going to ask, really, are 91% of the families actually strong? And where does that rating come from if it's not the case? And if someone tells you, oh, that's a totally realistic number, make them defend it, because we know from demographic information that it's not. So where is it? Why is it that that is the rating that people are being given? And you have to make it a safe space for them to give you honest answers. Sometimes the answers to questions like this are, we've got 8,000 things to do. And if we answer this way, it lets us focus on these other areas that are important. And if there's no sense that the data they're collecting is being used in meaningful ways, that's an efficiency decision that a lot of people are going to make. That is also a structural problem, not a people problem. That is a problem in how your organization is structured around information flow, not a problem with the person who says, I've got 50 things to do. I got time to do 10 of them. I'm going to do efficiency bias on the rest. That's how it goes. So you have to provide an open forum so that you can have a real conversation about where these screening results come from. Your family advocates are almost certainly well-meaning, and if your program is doing its training right, they know what they're doing. They've got training. They are well-meaning and they are trained. So why is it that they are reporting information to you that's not likely to be reflective of reality? And then talk to them about what's the cause, because when you know the cause, now you can develop a plan to actually address the issue. And that's the important part about inclusive team building to solve problems. Bring people in who are going to be able to tell you, then give them permission and create the space for them to be open and honest and transparent with you, in part by being open and honest and transparent with them. We don't have the resources to tackle everything. We know that if you're at the poverty level, you're probably not strong on income, but what does that mean? Like, how much help do they really need? These are the kind of things you can have an open discussion about. In the implementation stage here, we've done this planning. Now we're going to go out and implement it, because what we found out in these different groups, when we put them together in a room in the implementation, is, oh, wait a minute, family advocates are really nice, well-meaning people. And they're worried that if they suggest that a family is not strong, that will harm the family's self-esteem and morale. If you're living at the poverty level in the United States today, you face a lot of challenges, especially today. There's a lot going on. But at any moment, this is an expensive country. It's challenging to be at the poverty level. You are on the margins in a lot of ways. Family advocates have a not unreasonable concern that if you tell them, I'm sorry, but you really are in need of help on income, that might impact the family's sense of self and opportunity, and might impact whether or not the family advocate can help them in other areas that they need. It is not an irrational or quote unquote wrong belief that this is there. It is, however, not good for your data collection and resource allocation. So training the family advocates that it's important to accurately assess the families, so that the program can make appropriate decisions, and so that the family advocates can make appropriate decisions about how to help families within the context of the bigger program goals. So a new training for pre-service coming down the line to help people to understand how the data is used. When you are filling out this screening, you are not judging this family. You are evaluating this family as one of many families in the program, so that the program can help where families need it most. Supervisors and coaches trained to support this. And then this implementation allows you to then try different things to see whether or not you get a more accurate view of the world. I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. Pilot this. Do not have everybody make a radical change. Try it out with a small group of people and see if it gives you more accurate data, and if they are able to engage with the families in a way that keeps the families with high morale and a sense of purpose and a sense of promise, and also give them a rating that says this family is genuinely in need. This is an important part of the process. When you're meeting people there and you're engaging with them, this is a big piece of what you're trying to do. Analysis. In our pilot group, hey, when we did this training and we looked at this, there were fewer families that were rated as strong. But what's interesting is we had interest as a category in there with strength and need and typical family, but now there's also interest, and a lot more families are now rated as interest, because it turns out that a lot of families are interested in getting help with income support. So interest, there's a lot more people who show interest, but interest isn't the same as strong, typical, or need as a rating. So when you're looking at what happens with this pilot group, one of the things you discover is that your categories are not really right for what you want. You want to say, are they typical? Are they like everybody in Head Start, which means they're going to be struggling but not in serious need? Are they in need? Or are they strong? For whatever reason, they have a support system, something else that lets them get by. Okay. But when interest really grows, that's where the challenge comes in. Okay, interest is something different. So, okay, next cycle, you're going to make additional changes. Maybe you expand the pilot group, maybe you don't. Maybe you go back and try this again with the pilot group with some modifications. But you're going to need to make some changes next cycle, because when interest is the biggest thing that grows, it now becomes difficult to compare that strong, typical, or need category. So that's one where the PS cycle is going to continue. You're going to have another year. How do you tell these stories? You want to communicate CQI to stakeholders, reviewers, and everybody else. How do you do that? The reality is, when you address a problem or a puzzle, it can really be a good CQI story. You want to do that. It does not have to be revolutionary change. Remember, small wins add up. It just needs to show that you're doing the right things in the right way and that you're getting those small wins. Now, one of the things I always tell people is, when you find that there's an issue and there's a problem, you don't start telling the story right after you identify the problem. Wow, we found this terrible problem, but we're going to work on it next year. That's not the story. The story comes after you've addressed it. So when you have an issue, you can think about what it's going to be like to tell the story in the future, but don't just automatically start telling everybody about all the problems you've encountered. Think about how to tell the story of the quality improvement cycle with the wins when you do that. And it can be many small wins, but you do want to focus on the wins. So create a collection of good CQI stories. We identified this issue. We went through the PS cycle. We planned, we implemented, and we analyzed. And wow, we saw this kind of improvement in our pilot group. And now we're rolling it out to the whole program. Or even better, we did it. We ran the pilot in the first year. It worked great. So we rolled it out. And here's the results of the full implementation. Incorporate the efforts that you are making into your self-assessment. How are you doing at your quality improvement processes? How many projects do you have underway and how are they going? What wins did you have from this process? And have you celebrated them? Have you translated them into stories you can use in your grant application, in reviews, etc.? When a reviewer comes out and asks you a question about program improvement, do you have a great anecdote? Well, yeah, we were really looking at this information and we saw that, yeah, a lot of our families were strong in the fall. And we knew that that wasn't really the case. And so we went out and we brought family advocates in. We had this group of people come together and we really focused on, what is it that is leading for this information to come this way? Oh, it turns out family advocates are just really awesome people who want to support the families. We did this training. We got this information. We found out that this is working. And that was 3 years ago. And now we've had a real systematic change over the last 3 years. We have a great tool. It is in there. And one of the things we found out is that we can actually have this whole family curriculum that we implemented that really makes the families feel that they have promise and that things are strong, even though sometimes we do have to rate them as having need. And those are the families where this family curriculum really strengthens that family's sense of opportunity and growth. You got lots of different things you can go in there, lots of different things come together. Personally, I love the where did people find out about us story, because you can very quickly show how we identified an issue. We had a lot of resources dedicated to something that wasn't working. We reallocated resources, and now we're putting money into the places and effort and time into the places that are going to generate recruitment. And that's where these stories can become really powerful. You don't have to have something where I changed the world with my CQI story. You just have to be able to say, we made things a bit better and we had these results. And now our families we can allocate resources to help them in the best way possible. We're able to reach out in the community much more effectively because of the work that we've done. And this is really the big piece of it. And one of the things about this, when we look at these things, is you can tell the stories very simply. You don't have to have big, complicated visuals. And if you've been inclusive and brought a lot of people into it, it's not just the executive director who's telling the story, it's managers all the way down to the family advocates and line staff. Hey, we had a big win. We shifted to more effective recruitment efforts, and we continue to analyze that data so that we make the most of our resources. And here's a donut plot to show you where we started. Put another donut plot in there down the line that shows that you're evaluating it, and here's how things happen each year. Maybe social media becomes more common. Maybe community events become more common. You can compare these over time. Hey, we realized that maybe interest shouldn't be in here, so we created it as a checkbox. A family can be interested regardless of their rating, and now the categories look more like what we would expect. Most people are typical, except in income, where we still have this real problem in the community with need. Unfortunately, Head Start doesn't get issued a magic wand where we can suddenly find all of them higher paying jobs. So we can recognize that income support is an area where we are likely to have high need. It's also an area where we may not be able to move the needle as much as we would like because we can't really control people's incomes the way that we can control other things. Food security, I can help them to get to the food bank. I can help them get WIC. Income support, it's hard for you to, at the Head Start program, to get them a higher paying job. So there's different pieces of this puzzle where you can tell the stories. You have impact, you can emphasize where you can move the needle. Now, this is a very useful tool. Improve your program in practical ways, involve stakeholders in decisions, build a process that will sustain efforts over time. CQI has enormous benefits for programs, and you should always implement it with this very practical sense in mind. Don't try to make revolutionary change, just try to make things better and tell the stories of how you do it. And that is what makes for quality improvement that's practical and applied and useful in Head Start programs across the country. So as I wrap up, before I go into Q&A, I'm going to do a quick review here of things happening at Acorn, and then I'll open up to questions in the last couple of minutes. And we have a YouTube channel. That's where this recording is going to go. So we have all of our past webinars are all on the YouTube channel. So go in, check out the YouTube channel, has all of our past recordings, has some other items on there, some interesting things there. We're putting more content up there and keeping it rolling. We are at Acorn Learning on YouTube. There's a bunch of Acorns out there, including an Acorn Learning that's a learning management system. You want to do that at Acorn Learning. That's us. And you can subscribe to our channel and get the latest updates as they come through. Upcoming professional development opportunities from Acorn. We have practical data skills for Head Start. That starts October 1st. That's next week. So if there's anybody who's looking at their calendar going, oh, I've got some extra time next week, and I would really love to learn a bunch of practical skills about how to apply data skills in my program. Practical data skills is really for people that are not data people, but are trying to build a strong data culture. And there's a real emphasis around what that looks like in practice in programs. So check it out. If you are not able to start October 1st, which is probably most of you probably have other things on your calendar, there is a cohort of it in the spring as well. Practicing Continuous Improvement workshop is coming. That is about exactly what we're talking about here, how to actually do that, how to design some of these things and talk about them in much greater detail than we talked about it here. And most importantly, some guides to how to go back into your program immediately and actually implement some of the stuff that we talked about today. Better Program Guidance Documents is one of our popular workshops. That's coming later in October. That's about how to evaluate the documents you have that provide guidance for staff in terms of how to provide data entry, policy and procedures, things like that. Free webinar, Data, Your Team's Effort, on October 29th. Coming soon, winter data camps. We have 3 winter data camps. We have 1 in December, 2 in January. Check those out if those dates work for you. And winter spring cohorts. A lot of the things that we have that are currently running here in the winter, they will be back for more in the spring. Manager Skill Certificate starts January 14th. That's a great thing for anybody who's a new manager or somebody who's been a manager for a while and just wants to kind of brush up on some core foundational communication, motivation skills. Data Literacy Credential, winter cohort is in January, spring cohort is in March. Visualizing Head Start data in Excel has a winter cohort on the 4th and a spring cohort on the 14th. That is our new introduction to data visualization in Excel. The first course is the first cohort of it is running right now, and it's the basics. It's data visualization principles, how to organize data to get it out of Child Plus, Copa, Go Engage, any of the various platforms that you have, and how to do essential data visualization bits and pieces like charts. And most importantly, it goes up through pivot tables and pivot charts. So if you are interested in learning how to make pivot tables and pivot charts, that is the course for you. There is a newly renamed course called Advanced Data Visualization in Excel. That is what we used to call the Data Analyst Certificate. Some market research said the word data analyst terrified people and they thought it was a giant math class. So we have shifted it to what it actually is, which is about using advanced features to do more sophisticated data visualizations, most importantly, to build refreshable templates and to do more complicated calculations, data cleaning, data wrangling, things like that. So it's also a 5-week course instead of an 8-week course, because one of the other things people said was it's really hard to make that 8 weeks work. So it's 5 weeks focused on advanced data visualization and tool construction, and that's March 24th. All righty. There are a bunch of the rest of the slides here. I will let you look at them in the deck. They're basically just details on the things I'm talking about. And I do want to leave at least a few minutes for any question and answer elements that are there. So we'll turn off the recording now.